With the MCU getting a huge acquisition with the Fox deal, getting the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and so on, how do I think that these characters will be introduced over the years? Hey movie fans, so I thought I'd bring back an older-ish segment that I've done a couple times that I thoroughly enjoy doing called How It Could Work, where I basically take a project that we know is in development or could someday happen, and more or less project how I think it could happen. I've done How Episode 8 Could Work, which I was really wrong on that one, but it's still a lot of fun. This time, I'm going to do how the Fox Marvel characters could be introduced in the greater MCU. So I'm talking Fantastic Four, the X-Men, and more? Let's break this down. I think the key thing to think of for this is it's gonna take time. You can't just rush in a whole bunch of major characters. It's gonna take a lot of time. So we're gonna break this down more or less over a timeline of how these characters will be introduced over specific movies, kind of leading up to where they're gonna be introduced, what stages we're going to take them on, so on and so forth, if that makes any sense. I think first off, we gotta start with Avengers 4, or Infinity War, because I'm kind of thinking that they're going to be connected. They're probably more or less part 1 or part 2 of the same movie. I think Avengers 4 is when we're going to start getting our first tastes, or at least references to these new characters. There's been some set photos or some speculation that there's going to be some form of time travel involved in the Avengers Infinity War. So whether that's certain characters going back in time, because we see some of them in outfits from the 2012, like the very first Avengers movie, so something causes them to go back in time, maybe? I think if they do go back in time, this could create a new timeline, in which case this new timeline, the X-Men are in this universe now, so you can bring in the X-Men via this new time paradox and already beat DC to the punch with DC trying to do Flashpoint to reset their timeline. I guess Marvel may or may not actually be beating them to the punch. If you do a timeline, that's a really easy way to be like, yep, the X-Men have always been here. What are you talking about? It'd be a really easy way to introduce them. However, that's how the X-Men get there. We're not going to meet the X-Men for quite a few years, but we'll come back to them. They won't be the only ones referenced in Avengers Infinity War, I think. I think quickly, in passing, now that they've kind of gotten the okay, I think once this deal officially goes through, I think you're going to see Tony Stark reference Dr. Reed Richards by name, of like a buddy I knew from college, or there's this really smart guy that I used to know. Just something really quick in passing, like how Captain America or the Winter Soldier name dropped Stephen Strange.
Bruce Banner, Stephen Strange, anyone who's a threat to Hydra.
Years before Doctor Strange came out, you could have something with Iron Man really quickly spout off Dr. Reed Richards, laying the groundwork for a Fantastic Four are in this universe. And Fantastic Four, like everything else, we're going to have to take time, because these characters, even more so than the X-Men, they need some TLC, they need some love and affection after their really bad movies, but we're going to slowly build our way into the Fantastic Four, into this universe. So we've just beaten Thanos. There's nothing else out there for us to take care of. Oh, except there is. At the end of Avengers 4, so when they think they're all clear, we see a wide open void of space, nothingness. And then, without a single word being spoken, you just see a silver surfboard and foot enter the frame. That's all you see. And it cuts to black, leading you to believe Silver Surfer's coming, and he's coming as a messenger for Galactus. Because honestly, that's probably the biggest acquisition Disney made with this whole Marvel characters side, at least. It's not the X-Men, it's not the Fantastic Four. You've got Galactus, an actual villain that's credible after taking out Thanos. Thanos is a credible villain. He's a major big bad. But where do you go after that? A dude that literally eats planets. That can be your next endgame. So Thanos was clearly the endgame from the first Avengers to Avengers 4. And after that, you set up, more or less you start over again. This time you're building to an even bigger threat with Galactus. And that starts with a Silver Surfer cameo. More or less kind of, we don't see Galactus for a little bit, because you gotta keep people waiting. Build up the anticipation. Next up on the Marvel docket, we have Captain Marvel, which is already filming right now. This movie, it's interesting though, because from what I believe, it is set in the 90s, so it's a backwards in time Marvel movie. Nick Fury's going to have both of his eyes, we're going to have Brie Larson as Captain Marvel, and you're wondering, how is this going to tie into any Fox characters? Again, we reference Reed Richards, this time as like an intern or like a dorky up-and-coming smart guy. He's there, but he's not huge yet. Also, there's word that the main antagonist for the Captain Marvel movie will be the Skrulls, with a secret invasion type storyline being teased. The Skrulls often have a lot of run-ins with the Fantastic Four, so you can kind of tease some Skrull interaction someday with the Fantastic Four. That's also another way you can get in the back door with Fantastic Four, with Skrulls, and probably a young Reed Richards working in some capacity with S.H.I.E.L.D. I think could be very fascinating. And then we have the next Marvel movie that we have at least confirmed that could tie into the greater universe is Spider-Man Homecoming 2, or whatever we want to call Spider-Man 2. Now, there's many possibilities that we can go with this. In Spider-Man Homecoming, one of the weird subplots that was going on in the background that clearly is laying groundwork for something was the Avengers Tower being sold to somebody. I'm still under the impression that it's going to end up being Oscorp. Norman Osborn buys the Avengers building, literally just take out the A, and it's already a gigantic O. But I read this theory online, and I'm kind of siding more with that, and it helps reinforce this idea of bringing the universe more together, of the Avengers Tower becomes the Baxter building, the home of the Fantastic Four. So your end credits for Spider-Man Homecoming 2, again, laying some small footwork, some small groundwork, getting people more and more excited for it. Spider-Man has saved the day. He's just taking a nice stroll around Central Park, just having a great day, maybe hanging out with MJ or the newly introduced Gwen Stacy. They look up and say, oh, that's cool. They finally finished the Baxter building. You get a nice pan up to the building, and you just see the four. The fours on the side of the building, and everyone loses their mind. That, I think, would be really, really cool. However, we're still not going to get a Fantastic Four movie. And I'll tell you why. Because on my timeline we have here, after Spider-Man 2, we have Avengers 5. Whatever that ends up being with this kind of new roster. So we probably have lost a lot of the main people due to contract negotiations or probably character deaths. So we probably don't have Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, any of the major ones, but we have this like new brand of Avengers. Now, what threat could be a good mid-level threat for them that would necessitate them coming together, but not so powerful that they couldn't absolutely take them out at the end of the day? What's one of the most powerful villains that Disney just acquired from Fox that has yet to be done correctly in a movie? How about Doctor Doom? Doctor Doom versus the Avengers. How great would that be? Now, this, with Doctor Doom as your villain for Avengers 5, this is where you introduce the Fantastic Four. Very similar to how you introduce Spider-Man in Captain America Civil War, this is how you could have introduced the Fantastic Four. Before they get their own movie, introduce them into a movie. You don't even have to say that they have previous experience with Doctor Doom. You could just say that these guys are probably like the best team in New York, or their skill sets are very valuable in this situation. That way, the audience kind of already knows this group of Fantastic Four. They're already invested in these characters. That way, when their movie does eventually come out, that's the first movie that'll come out after Avengers 5 on my timeline here, then we already know these characters, we're already invested, we're curious enough. That way, if there's anything that doesn't quite fit with these Fantastic Four, they can already make the pre-adjustments before the movie comes out, as opposed to, I don't know, Fan 4 Stick, where they made adjustments halfway through filming and it completely changed the whole film. But there's one more surprise in Avengers 5. Who haven't we talked about a while in this video? Oh right, the X-Men. How do you branch in the X-Men with the Avengers? Easy, with the one character who doesn't give a crap about either one. Deadpool. Literally all you need to do is just have, I don't know, a shot of the new Avengers building or the Avengers fighting in the middle of the city, and you have an onlooker, and then they turn around and you see it's Deadpool, and all he says is just, well, could be worse, or some like really quippy, weird, all he has to say is just one line of just completely breaking the fourth wall. You could have Deadpool be the one that kind of acknowledges, we don't know how we're here, but we're here. Because Deadpool as a character is probably the only one that can get away with it. And in Disney's situation, they could probably use that to their advantage. Of Deadpool can be the logistical bridge that bridges the, how are we here? Disney bought things. That's how we're here, I guess. So now we're finally at the Fantastic Four standalone movie. But they're still not quite strong enough to be by themselves yet. They're like the kids that keep getting into trouble, so you need to have one of the parents stay at home while the other one's doing other things. So, who's the responsible one that's supposed to make sure the Fantastic Four stay in Marvel's good grace and make sure they have a good movie? Spider-Man. So I already said that Spider-Man, in my universe, will connect with Fantastic Four, as his end credit scene is the one that introduces us that they have a new building. I think he will play the role that Iron Man played in Spider-Man Homecoming. It would be a nice continuation of his narrative, more or less of his arc of growing from up-and-comer to more or less a full-fledged hero who's taking new people under his wing. That, and I really just want to see Spider-Man and Human Torch team up. That would be fantastic. But again, how do we introduce the X-Men? Easy. As villains. Wait. I'm not crazy. Trust me. So, how are we going to make this work? Like the Fantastic Four, I think the X-Men probably need to be introduced in some other movie first before we get their own movie. More or less just to establish that this isn't the same continuity and they are in the same universe now, and just kind of ushering it well so it blends together. Now, people have been wanting some X-Men Avengers versus like fighting movie for a while, and now we actually have that possibility. It could be very similar to Captain America Civil War in that both sides are right on a given issue. Maybe it's mutant rights or whatever else, and you have Avengers versus the X-Men, and it could be a lot of fun. And at the end of it, that's when the X-Men more or less become official members of the Avengers, leading in to their first actual movie, which will come after this. However, there's one more thing to include for Avengers versus X-Men movie, if that's what they want to go with, which in my case, yes please. The end credits scene for that one, that is where you meet Galactus. Actually see him. He's just the end credit scene, doesn't say anything. You just see how large, how much of a looming presence he is. This is where we finally reveal that it's Galactus. Then, you have Avengers 6. Now you need someone a little bit more important than Doctor Doom, but probably not as serious as Galactus, but it's going to require everyone to team up, both Avengers and X-Men. So, this time, we bring in Kang the Conqueror, because why not? It's a fun name to say. He's a big, credible threat to take on both squads, uniting as one for the first time. They eventually, of course, beat him, but then, oh boy, the end credit scene for this one. So you gotta think, at this time, it's a new Avengers squad. You've probably got Spider-Man leading it, Fantastic Four, X-Men, hopefully Falcon is still there, Winter Soldier, etc., etc. These like newbies. My end credit scene for Avengers 6, what I think would happen is to really show that this is a massive, massive event with Galactus coming. You have whatever members of the Avengers survive Infinity War re-sign for this cameo and for Avengers 7. So you get a whole bunch of the original Avengers to come back and more or less issue a warning of, this is what's on the horizon. We came back to help because Galactus is coming. Can you imagine the fan reaction of, it'll have been quite a few years by then, of maybe Chris Evans or Robert Downey Jr. or Chris Hemsworth will want to come back to their role. If you get one, but if you can get all of them to come back to team up with the new guys, with the X-Men, to have a fully realized squad, that could be a lot of fun. That leads us to Avengers 7. Wow, we are really planning this far out, I guess. That's where we get the massive, massive fight between Avengers, the old squad, the new squad, the X-Men, Fantastic Four, versus Galactus. But not just those guys, you gotta bring in the bad guys too to show how much of a threat Galactus is. So you have Fantastic Four working with Doctor Doom, working with Iron Man, working with maybe a possibly resurrected Captain America if he chooses to die, which he totally is. All these great Marvel characters facing off against this one gigantic being, something we never thought we'd get. And that's what it all leads to. So this deal is a big thing, but I'm more excited for the villains that we're getting, but I realize that if we're gonna get these characters, we need proper time. We can't full on DC this and just rush everything into production, and half of our projects don't end up coming. But you need time to develop these characters that people are actually going to care about, so we don't have a repeat of all the previous Fantastic Four movies, or what's even currently going on with like the X-Men movies, of people getting fatigued. Marvel's got a formula, and they clearly are planning long term. So I'm thinking a long term with them, but I think that's really how they could integrate these new characters in a fun and exciting way. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, if you like what you see and want to see more, subscribe to the channel, or find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Uncharted Media. Stay sharp, movie guys and gals!